Good afternoon. I'll try and speak slowly so you can hear me. I know not everyone speaks English, and I definitely do not speak Polish. I understood about 3 words what he said, but I know what he was reading. So I also move around a lot. It's a nervous tick, but I'll try to keep it within camera range, apparently. So I'm Andrew Lewman. I'm from the Tor Project. You might have heard of us. We've been in the news lately. Over the past few years, I have been working with victims of abuse, stalking, and human trafficking. That's specifically what I work on. But I also work on Tor. I help run the organization. I help keep coordinated. Tor is about 30 people right now and about 3,000 volunteers. And I am the law enforcement liaison. So I've spoken to all sorts of 3- and 4-letter agencies about various things about Tor, about how to be anonymous, about how the criminals are being anonymous, and about how normal people are using Tor just to avoid being stalked, harassed, and just random people, random networks recording all their data for no apparent reason. So there's a book that's really popular in the US, maybe popular in other places, by George Orwell called 1984. It's about a dystopian future where everything is recorded, controlled, and you as a citizen have no rights, and the governments are in control of everything. George Orwell was an optimist. He could not predict the future. He could not predict the power of computing. He could not predict big data. He could not predict commercial companies using big data to better market and sell things to you, or track you, or give all that data to law enforcement, or organized crime, or any other entity who asks for it. So what is this? What do we work into? So surveillance. Everyone always thinks of surveillance as, typically people think of surveillance as police officers sitting in a car with binoculars recording a suspect, writing down what they're doing, writing down who they're talking to. Now you can do that online in millisecond resolution and store it forever. This is a company slide. I took the name off on purpose because they all have slides like this. If you can see it, you can monetize it. Do you want to charge more for gaming? Do you want to charge more customers for BitTorrent access? Do you want to charge more customers for access to Google? Do you want faster access to Google? Or pick a website. And because you can look at it on the network, you can pull the data out. You can now stratify that and charge access to, are you tired of your World of Warcraft server being really slow? Well, pay another €5 a month, and you will have instant fast access on this new upgraded plan. The deep packet inspection technology that makes that happen, I've used it in the past. I used to run global networks. I'm fully aware of what attacks and all this looks like. I'm fully aware of humans who click on random executables mailed to them by strange addresses. But it said it was a fluffy bunny. Of course I clicked on it. It's supposed to be some new dancing baby game. Meanwhile, it installs itself, and as you've all heard today, advanced precision threat and all this other stuff. It's all out there, and the weakest link in almost every case has been the human. This is an example of deep packet inspection. This is from a packet trace in Iran. One of our users connected to Tor using our old protocol, using the old software, and this is what they saw. 26 seconds it took the Iranian government to identify what they were doing, how it were doing, and there's a reset. Is there a pointer on this thing? There's a reset at the very bottom right here. When you look at the actual packet trace, which I didn't put the whole data up there, when you look at it, that reset comes from someplace 500 kilometers away. It does not come from the user anywhere in there. It definitely doesn't come from the Tor server on the other end in Germany. That's what deep packet inspection gets you in today's network. So there's far more threats. Komodo was a certificate authority. They served up SSL certificates, code signing certificates, authentic code certificates, all this stuff. They were hacked, all their private keys were stolen, cloned, and now the Komodo hacker, as he's known, people always, in the US, it was always attributed to some Iranian citizen. Lots of people in law enforcement have told me it's an Iranian citizen. Yes, he happens to live in Toronto, though. Toronto, Canada, not actually Tehran, like the news reported. He served up and created fake certificates for update.microsoft.com, for Apple's software update, for Tor Project, for Google, and for a whole bunch of other domains. And with that, he gets to man in the middle every single bit of traffic that goes to those domains when you hit his proxy, infects you with your malware, and he gets to watch all your updates. He gets to update your system for you. And it turns out he did actually serve some pretty good updates. He served real valid updates just with a little extra code added in there. So he could now watch your machine, what you do, and how you're doing it. So I picked on China because I'm from the US and because I've heard China about 4,000 times today about how they're the source of all internet attacks, which is funny because most people saying that are Americans who neglect the fact that America is actually the source for most attacks because we have lots of computers and lots of bandwidth. But every government is taking down internet websites. Websites that are censored, filtered, whatever, for any reason. The traffic to them has been recorded, the traffic from them has been recorded, and the content is looked at and said, well, this doesn't really go with our national identity, let's take the website down. And then you have the internet service providers. So in the US, we have a 6 strikes plan. It's not a legal law, it's an unofficial agreement between the ISPs and the copyright industry that says we are going to, if someone's doing BitTorrent sharing or copyrighted file sharing for any reason, we'll send in some warnings, and then on the 6th warning, they'll get their website taken down. So that sounds good to a lot of people saying, well, I don't really want my work stolen or something like that. To realize in order to do that, they have to surveil your entire network, they have to record all your data, they have to look deep inside your packet streams to figure out what's going on. And once they have that data, do you really think the internet service providers and the advertising companies that pay for it are going to just stop there and say, oh, well, we can only use this data for this. We can't use it for all this other stuff. Well, here's a confusing graphic that shows you where your data goes. So you're sitting here in the middle, and your data, you simply go to google.com or, pick a website, pick whatever news website you like. It has ads all over it, and your data is now sold to all those different places multiple times, packaged with other people, and resold and resold and resold. In the US, you have no right to your data. Once you browse a third-party website that's not yours, or even if it is yours, once you give your data to a third party, they own the data. They can do whatever they want with it. I'm reminded every time I come to Europe, especially when I check into a hotel, there's this little thing they make you sign, and the very bottom says, you have the right to review, edit, and remove your data from our systems. I've never actually tried to do that because I'm not a European citizen, but from European citizens who've told me they've tried to do that, it doesn't work very well. So at least I get a warning saying, hey, we're collecting your data and we're going to use it and sell it. Advertising companies' reach is surprisingly large. This slide is about 2 years old. It's based on some academic research as to what % of the top 100 websites worldwide had which tracking systems on it. So Google Analytics, Google AdSense, DoubleClick is now owned by Google. Google sees a huge swath of the internet. Maybe you like this because you want to get better access to ads and you want to get better access to products that that are more in tune with what you want. Maybe you're law enforcement and you're going after criminals and you realize that the website itself, call it criminal.pl, doesn't log anything, but they have Google AdSense installed and they have Google Analytics installed. You can now go to Google, subpoena all the data, and get a huge amount of data from the users, again, at millisecond resolution, down to what your desktop looks like, down to how big your browser window was, down to which version of browser you have, down to which plugins you have installed and which versions. So you can fingerprint the traffic down to it's one of these 5 users, not these other 5 million. So ISPs have all this data. They're collecting it as part of the 6 strike thing. How many people have seen that ad on apple.com? You haven't. Apple.com doesn't have ads. It's only for Apple. What happened here is I was on a hotel network, and the ISP they bought off of, in order to get free internet, they inject ads into the traffic based on what you're looking at. That's what it looks like. I'm pretty sure Apple would not want that ugly thing sitting on their homepage, injecting, on their page at all, destroying how they spend lots of time figuring out how to make their page look good. And here comes some guy injecting a stupid ad into it. And if you think it's just Apple, no, there's Google. At least they gave you this little thanks, no thanks, opt out. When you read through the opt out language, it basically, they set a permanent cookie that will identify you forever. and they still record all your data, but they don't show you the ads. So they still know where you're browsing or what you're doing. You just don't get the annoying ads anymore. So lately, we've been told Tor stinks. The National Security Agency of the US has a program to try to break down Tor and figure out how to identify Tor users, which, their goal is to go, from the legal perspective, their goal is to go after, all the bad people on the internet. And they're quite frustrated with Tor. We even talked to them in 2007. One of the things that was released by The Guardian last week was our own presentation, which has been available on in our code repository for about 5 or 6 years now. They released the presentation that Roger gave to the NSA about here's what Tor does and here's how it works. Which is funny because all our code is open and freely available. Anyone can download and look at it. But it took Roger to go put us on the radar of the NSA. What they realized, though, is that trying to break the Tor technology and encryption is going to be difficult. So go after the users. What they really did was target the applications we use, like Firefox, and the end users to make silly mistakes, and then identify users that way, which works pretty well. Once again, the user is a problem in almost all computer security. So Tor is just a technology, just like Twitter is just a technology. Everyone loves Twitter. Everyone loves to get on, tweet all sorts of things. I hear all sorts of stuff. The US State Department got involved in a few years ago and said, you can't take Twitter down because all these Iranian activists are using Twitter. Please don't shut your site down. We love Twitter. We, the US government, fully support Twitter. We want Twitter, 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 blah, blah, blah. That's awesome until people protest over Twitter in the US. Then, oh my God, Twitter is the devil. Twitter can't be used. Twitter needs to censor its content. Twitter needs to control what it's doing. And Twitter needs to start requiring real names and fully identified data. And you should have driver's license or passport required to get on Twitter. This is the exact same Twitter. Everyone loved it here. Wait, it's used in the US? Oh my God, horrible. And what the FBI did, because I talked to the agents who did this takedown, they went to Twitter, they filed a subpoena, they got an emergency subpoena, which is a court order, came back really quickly, went to Twitter and said, give us the IP address of the person with this account. And the guy was using a hotel room somewhere in Pittsburgh. They went, found the IP address, found the guy with it. Took them all of total of 3 hours to go from start to finish to find the person sitting in the hotel room and stop him. What that did was teach everyone else in the US, from now on, if you're going to organize protests in the US, you need to hide your IP address, you need to hide who you are, or you need to be outside the country so that the US can't grab you so quickly. There still is a reality of MLATs and all these other legal agreements that take time to process and go through. So what do you do? Well, you can rebel and just revolt and either get off the internet or strike up an armed rebellion and decide you need to take down the government. I'll tell you, if you've watched the North African armed rebellions lately, they don't work so well. Tunisia is sort of a success story, but everything else hasn't really gone the way they expected. So, or you can write code. So we write code, we do advocacy, we do trainings. I spend most of my time training law enforcement and their helpers on how to use Tor, how to be anonymous. It's really tough to be a 13-year-old girl if you're coming from FBI.gov. Criminals pick up on that really, really quickly. There's a very quick story is there was a child trafficking ring being investigated, and the agents investigating it were coming out of Quantico, Virginia. I don't know if any of you know what Quantico, Virginia is, but the only thing that's there is a pizza shop, a US Marine base, and the FBI. 2 of those 3s seem suspect to any criminal looking at the IP address or where this 13-year-old girl is coming from. They don't care if it's the Marines or the FBI, it's risky enough, so it blew their entire operation. It never said FBI, it never said anything, it was like some, quote, private VPN. But it came out of Quantico, Virginia, and that was enough to scare the ring away from this person who joined. So what are we? We're an online anonymity software and network. We mostly develop the software. The network is run by roughly 5,200 volunteers in the world right now in something like 88 countries. The goal of that is so that no one organization can simply gather all the nodes together, collect everything, and go seize all the servers. We are in countries that do not have MLATs or legal agreements with each other, and we as a Tor Project, the nonprofit, do the Tor Network. It's all volunteer driven because we've been told repeatedly, if we, the nonprofit, if I personally ran any part of the Tor Network, I would become liable for everything ever done over Tor ever. And I already have enough agents visiting my house and the office. I don't need more. We're freely licensed. Our goal is to make it ubiquitous, that you can use Tor however you want. We've talked to many of the Fortune 500, the big IT vendors, who I won't name, but they've been interested in putting a Tor module in because a lot of their clients are asking, how can I hide my address when I'm online? Because places, what does the CIA Google for? Google knows exactly what the CIA is searching for. And who do they sell that data to? So if you can hide who you are online, then you're a little bit safer. We do a lot of research. We actively encourage researchers to attack us, break the design, break the code, and the better ones actually give us solutions, not just here's a way to break your code. Here's a fix for your design. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And here's research. I got my PhD off doing this. Here's 3 or 4 years of research that says this fix works. You should consider putting it in code. And then almost invariably they go off to the financial industry and make a lot of money and never pay attention to their PhD research again. But meanwhile, we have a number of PhD candidates and students and master students and now undergrads at all these places working on things. Recently, we've been doing a lot of work with Norginet because they're all IPv6, and we're working on Tor over IPv6. It does work. It might not be as anonymous as IPv4, but it's a work in progress. We have a number of tools. We have this Tor, of course, which is this little command line daemon that runs in the background. It's not very exciting. It's not very usable. Tor browser bundle is what most people think of. It's a heavily modified Firefox that has Tor included and just does everything for you to keep you anonymous by default. If you decide to go log into Facebook or Twitter or anything, pay your taxes online through it, it's up to you. The point is that you're anonymous by default. What you divulge is yours. Which ties into this. First rule of privacy. You decide what you share, not what someone else should take from you. And then here's a helpful Venn diagram. The internet's not private. It never has been. Just because you don't put your name on something doesn't mean you can't be tracked down and tied back to you all the time. Amazon.com knows a lot about me. It doesn't seem to matter where I come from. I mean, obviously once I log in, they know who I am and what I'm doing. But over the past few years, I've been using Amazon. They know a lot about my data, my shopping habits, what I look for. If I do actually come from my home IP address, they can quickly delineate between who's me and my daughter. We obviously search for different things, thankfully, but I'm not a 13-year-old girl, and what she searches for, what I search for on Amazon, it's shocking when you first go to the page, they're sort of confused. Right? Who is this? We know this household, we know this IP address, we're not sure who this is. Is this Andrew or is this his daughter? And then within 2 or 3 clicks, all the products change to which one it is. So who actually uses this thing? The vast majority of our users are normal people, just like you, me, whatever. They go out, they do searches, they want to keep their private information private. They're happy to be in the non-anonymous browser, using Google, using Facebook, using whatever. But then they want to go look up a condition, or they don't want the ads tracking or whatever. They go back to Tor browser, do their work, back and forth. Law enforcement are huge users of Tor. They will never admit it publicly. I spend all my time flying around to meet all sorts of agencies to talk about Tor, to talk about how to be anonymous online, because as crime moves online, they need to move online. And the more interesting thing is a number of officers and agents are now concerned about their families being used against them. They're all on Facebook, they're all on Twitter, VContact, or whatever, and now the criminals are picking up on this. So, go for your circle. Pressure your kids, kidnap your kids, do other horrible things to your family to get you to stop investigation or to get you to back off. Human rights activists is sort of obvious. They're already in a country where they're not very popular, and they need to protect themselves when they're online, even just from their traffic, of where they're going and what they're looking at. That's sometimes enough to get a visit from a Ministry of Culture or something that says, you shouldn't be doing this, stop it. Business executives, militaries don't tell us what they use it for. And then my specialty has been abuse victims, and the ability to be anonymous and not tie your current life to your past life
as part of the healing process is really powerful. I've been surprised at how many people have come to me. They're very well-known people. They've been abused in the past, and they want to help others, but they don't want to help others as their personal name or their public name, because then they get all sorts of extra attention they didn't want to get. They just wanted to help someone. So being anonymous helps them a lot. This is a shot from Egypt during the first revolution about 2 years ago, and they're still revolting today, or trying to revolt, or trying to throw governments out, or swap governments, or do whatever. We did a lot of work with Egyptians. We happened to be there in 2008 doing a lot of work with them, and really women's rights activists trying to improve the lot of women in Egypt. And we did all this training with the various human rights organizations. And then when the government shut off the internet and everything else went wrong, they had all this protection. They had all this electronic protection. Obviously, Tor is not going to stop any sort of munition or bullet, but being able to protect themselves when they're online mattered a lot as they're trying to help people around the country, even organize, even get information out that says, regardless of what you see on the TV of everything on fire, that's only a couple of places. Everything else, everyone's fine. So-and-so is still alive. Don't worry about it. So there's another use case here of criminals. Criminals obviously want to be anonymous online. Criminals are opportunists. They will take any technology they possibly can and pervert it. For 2,000 euros an hour, I can buy real-time FaceTime using Apple's FaceTime technology, chat of watching someone abuse a 5-year-old boy. It's horrible. Apple obviously isn't going to advertise that, but again, criminals are opportunists. You can get real-time FaceTime chats with somebody. The ad is always, I'm talking to my daughter or something over FaceTime to check in with her. Criminals will use that and say, look, I can do these horrible things with it. Thanks for making the technology. This is from the Silk Road takedown. Silk Road was a website run by a guy who was trying to become the Amazon of illicit drugs in the US, and I'm sure you've heard of it. It was all over the news the past 2 weeks. It's still all over the news today because now that they caught the guy, they got the server, and in the server, he kept all the data. He apparently logged everything and kept it for years. So now all these Silk Road users are at risk because this guy apparently had poor operational security. And now that the federal government has his servers, law enforcement has some pretty smart people, and now they're going through it trying to reverse engineer every transaction, who's who, who's whatever. And apparently 8 people got arrested this morning in the UK, US, and Sweden for early on users of Silk Road. But so again, law enforcement goes after the humans. Tor obviously wasn't much of an impediment to them to get into it, especially once you capture the human who has access to everything. It's pretty easy to pressure a human into doing things he may not want to do. And that goes the flip side of organized crime. So then there are, Iranian hackers who do all sorts of stuff, whether they're Iranian or not, sort of irrelevant. They put up pages like this. And then this is the Tunisian information ministry. They have these pictures all over the place, and some of these pictures were leaked as to here's what's going on inside Tunisia just as the whole revolution was happening a few years ago. So people realize that just because the phone works now and the network works now doesn't mean it's actually safe. So how many people actually use Tor? Well, the first trick is run an anonymous network. There's no registration, there's no demographics collected. We have a US National Science Foundation grant to find out how do you measure an anonymous network. There are roughly 1 million daily users. Typical use case we've seen for across the board, whether it's normal people, law enforcement, militaries, whatever, is they have the normal browser, they have Tor browser, they connect it up, they do their Tor thing when they need to, and they shut it back down. So we have a lot of churn daily users. Other thing you've probably heard is there's a botnet that said, hey, this Tor thing is really cool, let's use that. For hidden service communication, for command and control. So our Tor user graph looks really cool. It goes right up to like 5 million or so, but we believe about 4 million of those are actually bots. And we're working on making life more difficult for bot herders to not use Tor. We want to support the humans using Tor, not the bots. So how does a normal proxy, VPN, all this stuff work? You set up a server somewhere in the world. Say you're a North Korean refugee, you escape to South Korea, you set up a server so your friends in North Korea can connect to your computer and then relay off to whatever website or people they want to talk to. That works really well. That works really well, assuming you trust the relay in the middle. If the relay goes evil and happens to be a North Korean agent recording all these North Koreans connecting to itself, then you're in trouble, because now it has all your connections, what you're doing, exactly everything that goes through it is recorded and sent back to the government, maybe. Even if the relay, you trust it, you trust the network around it, because the network gets to see everything going in and out of the server, so it can record all the exact same data, even if the relay in the middle is run by people you really trust. So what does Tor do? So we have software. You have to download it. It runs on pretty much any computer you can imagine, from Androids to iOS to old IRIX systems to Windows to Macs to pick a system and we probably compile on it. It downloads a picture of the whole Tor network, and then your client controls where the traffic goes. It picks 3 nodes at a minimum, an entry, a middle, and an exit. And what you do is you send your traffic. It wraps all your traffic in encrypted tunnels or layers, hence onions. And you send your traffic through here. So the risks to the Tor network are the entry node can see where you are, because this is a direct connection from your IP address. Some people do all sorts of things. They'll go down to a laundromat and they'll use some stolen Wi-Fi and then do something else to hide that first connection from the entry node to the client. And then these two, everything is wrapped in encryption, so someone sniffing right here at most can learn you're connecting to a Tor node. They can't see what you're doing inside your traffic. We actually have a thing called pluggable transports and bridges, which are non-public nodes. You generally have to get them through your social graph, which has its own risks, but if you trust your social graph, then you're all set. Some people call those social networks. Some people call those friends. Your friend says, hey, here's an IP address. I'm running this non-public node. You should connect to it. You connect to it, and then then no one sees what's going on. Traffic between all these nodes is layered in encryption, and then the last node has the last layer of encryption, and then you go off to your destination site, whether it's chat server, web server, your home server, whatever it is. The exit node can record your traffic and can see what you're doing. If you're not using encrypted protocols, then it can actually manipulate your traffic, because it's all plain text. How does that look like on, roughly on the wire? This is what we mean by layered encryption. Your traffic is in the middle, and you wrap 3 layers around it as you authenticate and encrypt between every relay, so that the relays in this server. So if you break this connection, you don't get this or this. Each one is an independent connection, setup, authentication, and teardown. What does it look like? That's what it looks like. That's the client view of it. And these are all relays. This is a map of the world. I'm here in Poland, and my first connection's in the US, my next one, I think that's Germany, and then somewhere down here in like Romania or whatever is a connection. So someone watching my internet just sees me connect to the US. Someone who wants to see what I'm doing and where I'm going as a whole has to watch the entire internet all at once, watch me connect from Poland to the US, and then come out over here and be able to track all that in real time. It's rumored the NSA, the Chinese MSS, and the Russian FSB can do this in real time. The NSA apparently can't actually do it based on the documents that were leaked or what's been made public so far. So I mentioned the National Science Foundation funds us to measure an anonymous network. One of the things we do is we collect all the metadata about the Tor network and we publish it. So you don't have to trust us. You can go download all the data. You can look through since the inception of Tor in 2004 or 3. You can look through all the data and see who's been running relays, see where the relays have won, and go from there. The network publishes an hour, it refreshes the directory listing every hour, and we have every copy of every consensus since the beginning. So you can look through it and see growth or shrinkage over time. And then we have this thing called hidden services. Hidden services were developed by contractors for the US Department of Defense and Finnish military. They were designed to be completely anonymous, hidden from both the sender and receiver client on the network. They develop an internal 6-hop connection in the Tor network, so it never actually leaves the Tor network. It only uses these .onion addresses, and Anyone can host one. You don't have to be a relay to host a hidden service. Tor clients can host hidden services. My laptop runs multiple hidden services for things like SSH and mail, so I can connect in remotely or not, and do all that without leaving a trail of where I'm going to. So you don't see me going to torproject.org. You just see random encrypted traffic to Tor relay. And eventually I get my mail from my server because I know how to authenticate that address. The address is a hash of your private or your public identity key. Your client makes it. It's only 16 bits. We could make it longer. We actually found that we should just make it longer because no one tries to remember those anyway. They're hex. Most people can't remember 16 bits of hex to save their life. So we probably should just make it 64 bits and use the full key or something. But that's your address. That's both your address and your routing address. So it's it's the name of your site and how to get to it in the DHT. That's the Tor Hidden Service World. This is what Silk Road relied on. Was that Silk Road had something.onion and people bookmarked it, and that's how you got to it to do your service thing, and then no one could find out where the server was. So instead, law enforcement in at least 7 countries had teams dedicated to breaking Silk Road because they all wanted to be the one to break Silk Road. I trained a lot of them, and a lot of them got thoroughly frustrated and were like, come on, just give me the back door. Just how do I get into this thing and break it? I want to be the guy who breaks it because it'll be a huge promotion for me. And yeah, that doesn't work. So they went after the human instead. So I kept this short because there's been a whole lot of stuff about press, a whole lot of press lately about Tor, and to leave more time for questions. So does anyone have any questions about Tor at all?
Yes, hello. I've got a question because I think you've got some requests from the governments for assistance during, for example, crime investigation. And if so, how do you handle it?
Well, they can't subpoena us, and they can't make legal requests saying give us the users because we don't know who the users are. Generally, it involves talking to one of us to explain how Tor works. In many cases, I've been to their country and trained other people in the same, and they look up the presentation, they look up the video they made of me, and whatever else they did about me, and say, here's how Tor works, here's what it does. There is no easy way to just simply grab the criminal on the other end. You need to go, figure out who this person is, and if they're using Tor or not. But we do have a phone number. It's on the website. I put my email address up there. I'm the law enforcement liaison. They can all come talk to me, or they can fly me to their country and then stalk me as I walk from my hotel to, which has happened in 4 different countries. I've been told, how was dinner last night? That was pretty good. Oh, you should have gone to the place across the street. Why don't you tell me? Yeah, I have far more stories like that, where random people follow me and I have no idea who they are. And then I ask the officers and they're like, oh, that wasn't us. I'm like, oh, good, great, thanks.
I have a question. For example, do you have any problems with TSA and other agencies around the world? Because you are involved in such a project, it can be very painful for your private life.
It can. I have had unknown people come up to me and ask me very personal questions that they would only know if they dug into my private life.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about your devices when you are crossing borders and so on. So do you have
my devices are pretty clean when I cross borders. I'm frankly mostly worried about the U.S. border than other borders. If I'm a guest of another law enforcement agency, they usually meet you at the airport, and then magically you can skip all sorts of stuff when you have a law enforcement agent with you, or someone from a ministry of whatever. In the U.S., I don't get that special privilege. I have to stand in line with everybody else and get questioned and get harassed and get my devices searched through like anybody else. For a while, I was interrogated every time I came into the U.S. With just a whole bunch of questions. It would take like 20 to 30 minutes to get through the guy at the booth, never mind going to the back room. But lately, for the past year, it's been clean. I have no idea why. No one can give me an answer. Friends I have in U.S. law enforcement said, well, you're not on any watch lists. I don't understand why they're asking you. And I said, well, great.
What countermeasures are you going to take so bots can't use Tor? Because it's meant to be anonymous, so
Yep.
how are you going to prevent this?
So it's a fine question. We have a big long blog post about this botnet herder who is using Tor, and really he's using, he, she, it, is using Tor's hidden services for command and control, not to actually do, they don't seem to actually putting traffic through Tor. The traffic seems to go through the infected computer. They're just using Tor for CNC. The problems with that are obviously anything we do to harm making hidden services usable makes it harder for humans to use them as well, the case you want people to use it for. Some of the simple things we've done is just the sheer scale of a botnet is 5 million or 4 million things connecting all at once. That creates a lot of directory overhead and a lot of other traffic and pulling down the directory every hour and all this other stuff. We've tried to slow it down so that if you make a lot of repeated requests to the same sort of address or identifier in a hidden service, it may get slower. The directory servers that host copies of the whole consensus directory are getting overwhelmed with requests. So we've made them basically, you know, if your client makes a request within too frequent a time, the directory server just ignores you, which also hurts humans who happen to be clicking refresh a lot, but not that many happen. And it's an open question. There are lots of proposals, and we've had some researchers talk to us about here's how to handle things at scale, and you know, but how do you tell one entity is controlling the scale versus just lots of really Tor becoming really popular? Like if 20 million Chinese came on right now, you couldn't differentiate that from, you know, a 20 million node botnet. They would look the exact same. So how do you? We don't know. Is the honest answer? Is that we're still working on it.
So maybe it just boils down to CAPTCHA thing.
Yeah. The other answer is to try to find the bot herder and say, stop it. Why are you doing this? Like, I know it sounds good, but you know, botnets seem to be doing just fine without Tor. If Tor went away today, your botnets would still be around for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
I don't think they need Tor to do anything they're doing. I think it really is just someone playing with it and saying, what can I do with this? And going from there.
See more activity after the Snowden affairs?
We've seen more users and a lot more requests for training of tell me how to use Tor safely. I heard this thing. I heard the NSA is, you know, watching me. There's the paranoid people who believe the NSA is, you know, they're so important, the NSA is watching them. And then there's the rest of the world that says, well, I actually am an agent for a foreign agency, and I'm not sure how I'm comfortable with the NSA watching my traffic and doing the things they've done in my country. Another challenge is if Tor is all you have against the NSA, you've already lost. Tor should be one tool in a toolbox full of tools, not just the one thing that's going to save you. With someone like the NSA or the Chinese MSS or Russian FSB or in any of your countries, you have your own federal police forces. They have access to huge swaths of your technology infrastructure. And they probably should to do their criminals, but at the same time, that assumes you trust them. I've been to some places where I've had to bribe the guard at the door from the Ministry of X to get in. And I'm thinking, how bad is corruption when I'm the guest, he works for the police force, and I have to bribe the policeman at the door to get into the own building. There's that sort of reality too, where people just don't trust their police forces, and they wanted to keep themselves private and anonymous from them. Then a lot of human rights organizations have started asking us questions about how do we actually use Tor safely, and tell me, you know, they've heard the pitch from the internet cheerleaders who are like, the internet's awesome, you can do all this cool stuff on it, and then now they're like, all right, give me the scare pitch of what have you seen happen in the world, and what should we be aware of before we actually start helping, you know, homosexual teens in remote areas. What risks are we going to have in that sort of environment?
Okay, I have another question. As far as I know, the exit nodes are the most critical for your operation in order to get to outside.
Yep.
And do you provide your own exit node? And do you know any people that have a problem with law that they provided in good faith an exit node and they were jailed, for example, for something bad done?
There was like 3 questions. Yes. Yes is the answer to all of them. I don't run my own exit node. I used to run an exit node before I worked for Tor. As soon as I worked for Tor, I had a bunch of lawyers tell me, as soon as a Tor employee or contractor runs an exit node, they become liable for Tor. That's equivalent to the Tor company running the exit nodes, and then you become, because you can't, it's a whole lot of legal stuff that happens, but basically don't run an exit node or you'll be personally liable and get sued and lose your house and then you'll be homeless. I said, okay, I'll stop running my exit node. You sufficiently scared me. But when I did run an exit node, I ran one for about 5 years. Never really had a problem. A couple abuse, people saying, so-and-so hacked or spammed from your IP address. And then you explain what Tor is, explain how I don't actually have access to the data or the users. And for the most part, they'd say, okay. Sometimes they'd block my exit node's IP address from the network, which is their prerogative. You can do what you want. Most of them only have the ability to block an IP address, like from their forum or from whatever, and then they're sad because then the attacker they have goes and buys a botnet, and then they pretty much just have to block the entire internet, and then they're really sad because they have no users. Do I know people who have been arrested? Yes. The police forces who don't understand what Tor is will see an IP address and say, look, all this child abuse material came from this IP address. This guy must be a huge child abuser. So let's go, send a SWAT team in, military team, kick down his doors, take all his computers, throw him on the floor, drag him into jail. And then we send a very nice letter saying this is a Tor exit node, this is what it does, we have proof that it's a Tor exit node. And then they'll do a forensic analysis of the computers and generally find nothing on there. So far, there has not that I know of, there has not been a criminal caught that actually ran an exit node and was actually did criminal activity at the same time. Because criminals tend to be leechers and they tend to be, take advantage of other people. So Tor exists, so why should I give it back if I can just use it and then, it'll go away, I'll move on to the next technology. That's the criminal's attitude. And it's been the criminal's attitude for, centuries. And then what was your last question? Or did I answer them? Okay.
For example, you said that okay, criminals are using your product. And what about criminals who are building an exit nodes on the legal devices, on people who are not aware of this? Did you hear about such situations?
We've never had that yet.
Okay. It is possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So, thank you, since it's already quite late.